China in 1738. The country is the world's largest economy, by some estimates accounting for a third of the world's output. China is thriving on agriculture, tea, silk and porcelain manufacture. The population had surged to an estimated 150 million people. Around this time, China was averaging 7 million births per year. Fast forward to the present. China's economy is again surging ahead, and it's now the world's second biggest. But a demographic crisis overshadows this remarkable advance. The population is nearly 10 times larger at 1.4 billion, but the number of births has fallen dramatically to a number comparable to 1738. It's what analysts call a grey rhino, a massive, predictable crisis charging straight at the global economy. An aging demographic is not unique to China. It's happening to industrialized nations all over the world. But right now, China's at the heart of global manufacturing and economic growth. Could the world's primary factory floor run out of workers? The shrinking population threatens to disrupt supply chains and upend geopolitical stability.
You're already seeing a very meaningful decline in the overall population, and therefore you're already seeing some of this show up in headline consumer spending as well, because there's simply not as many consumers relative to 5 years ago. And when you combine that with the pressures that are already evident on employment and income growth from the collapse of the property sector, the implosion of China's overall credit bubble that happened over the last, from immediately after the global financial crisis, it's hard to see exactly where you're going to produce rapid household consumption growth that can power the economy forward.
China's demographic crisis stems from aggressive state planning, which artificially cut birth rates. The draconian one-child policy of population control, which was introduced in 1979 and ran until it was phased out from 2015. Another factor is rapid economic development. While urbanization, falling marriage rates, economic anxiety among young people, and a shrinking pool of women of childbearing age are making the problem worse. China's population fell for a fourth consecutive year in 2025 to 1.4 billion, a faster decline than in 2024. A year earlier, China recorded its first total population decline since 1961, and that was the last year of the Great Chinese Famine. China has one of the lowest fertility rates in the world, at around 1 birth per woman, which is well below the 2.1 births required to maintain the population. This demographic collapse is largely driven by the exorbitant financial burden of starting a family, making it one of the most expensive places to have children globally relative to average incomes. Other East Asian economies, like Taiwan, South Korea, and Singapore, face similar demographic crises, driven by similarly high living costs and prohibitive childcare expenses. And women are having babies later in life. The average age for a Chinese woman's first birth has risen above 28 years and is as high as 32 in wealthy urban centres like Shanghai or Beijing. China's current policies are kind of a scaled-down version of Japan's ineffective response to falling birth rates. In Japan, fertility fell from 1.45 in 2015 to 1.13 in 2025. Japan didn't have a one-child policy. So with China facing even deeper structural demographic constraints, it's not surprising that its fertility rate has already fallen below Japan's. And fewer people are getting hitched. Between 2013 and 2024, the number of marriage registrations fell by a massive 55%. With families traditionally favouring sons over daughters, decades of sex-selective abortion have created a severe shortage of women of childbearing age. Women increasingly hold more degrees than men, and many prefer to marry men with equal or higher education and income levels. This dynamic makes it challenging for some male non-graduates to find partners, while some highly educated women may prefer to remain single rather than marry someone they see as less compatible. In Western nations, out-of-wedlock births can help to cushion declining marriage rates. In the European Union, around 42% of births on average are outside marriage, and in 6 EU countries, out-of-wedlock births outstrip those within marriage. But non-marital births are rare in China, due to cultural and bureaucratic reasons. Local government agencies generally require a marriage certificate before issuing a birth certificate, or a household registration called a hukou. Without a hukou, children face major barriers to access public schooling and subsidized healthcare. China's population has been shrinking since 2022 and is aging rapidly, complicating Beijing's plan to boost domestic consumption and rein in debt. There are more old people than children, and the number of people aged over 60 is nearly a quarter of the population. By 2035, the number of over 65s is set to hit 22% of the population. That's 310 million people. This means the over 65 demographic will be nearly the total current population of the United States. Automation and AI may play a role in helping China offset the impact of the falling birth rate. The British bank Barclays reckons that the Chinese workforce might shrink by 37 million within the next decade. Barclays believes that some of the resulting shortfall could be made up by humanoid robots, but they would only partially offset the effects of a tightening labor supply.
The important variable is not how well China is doing in terms of improving technological productivity. The important variable is, does that allow them to change the structure of the economy itself towards something more sustainable? Because right now, if China does produce globally competitive, low-cost manufacturing operations, the only way that China can still grow as the largest investor in the world in relative terms compared to the rest of the world is by displacing similar patterns of investment overseas. It will not be based on generating domestic markets that are robust enough in and of themselves. And that's the dilemma I think that Beijing faces. It's that most of what China is pursuing in terms of its new strategies is a national security related strategy rather than a growth-focused strategy overall.
Beijing has integrated population planning directly into its core macroeconomic strategy. The 15th five-year plan, which was introduced this year and runs until 2030, explicitly outlines policy plans to build a childbirth-friendly society. The economic blueprint earmarks an estimated 23 billion euros for birth support initiatives. Subsidies have been introduced in several regions, such as payouts in eastern cities of 10,000 yuan, which is around 1,270 euros for second and third children. However, these fragmented incentives don't outweigh the prohibitive costs of child-rearing and housing in China's big cities. Beijing said it would actively respond with policies for its rapidly growing elderly and its young people, including providing childcare subsidies and making preschool education free. The government pledges that women will throughout pregnancy have no out-of-pocket expenses. All medical costs, including in vitro fertilization, will be fully reimbursed under its National Medical Insurance Fund.
Incentivizing localities to provide that money and incentivizing private companies as well to provide additional subsidies as support for parents. But whether this money is even there is a huge problem. I mean, regional and local governments in China are already in huge amounts of debt. So transferring that debt across is really hard, and they would have to, give up on spending money on other things and other priorities that the government has set for them. So it's really just if the money doesn't come from the central government, it will be really, really hard to move the dial.
Analysts argue that China could boost its birth rates, increase consumer spending, and fix its struggling industries simply by putting more money directly into the hands of its citizens. However, the Communist Party is unlikely to make this shift because it would reduce state control and weaken its political power.
And there is also, I guess, a big ideological component behind all this. So Beijing still wants to maintain its grip on fertility policy, like they have since the establishment of the People's Republic, and with massive policies in the past, like the one-child policy, really dictating people's choices when it comes to fertility and family life. They seem very resistant to abandoning that layer of control.
It's very difficult to sustain that narrative amidst these headwinds. And again, this is all this has all been fairly predictable, but most people thought it was the next decade's problem. Most of the predictions for when China's population would peak, even as late as 2021, until the 2020 census was released, were putting that date out into the early 2030s or the late 2020s. All of a sudden, it's advanced, 10 years earlier. And so I don't think that the economics or the economic or political analysis has caught up with the reality of that these headwinds have already arrived and are already meaningfully impacting economic conditions.
China is hurtling toward a demographic cliff, and financial incentives alone cannot reverse its birth rate collapse. While financial perks can ease the burden, families face massive structural and cultural roadblocks. It will take a lot more to stop a rampaging grey rhino.